The next stop on our journey along the timeline of eternity will be at the time of the birth of our solar system. Our solar system had its start with the birth of the great central sun over Sol Michael. As each piece of energy moved away from the birth hole, the main creator or hydrogen atom, it was composed of fiery gases. Mixed with those fiery gases was the spirit mind. As each of these pieces of energy moved out away from the womb of creation, there were spirit thought forms swirling in with the gases with tiny filaments of thread still attached to them. These tiny filaments, the umbilical cords, are composed of ethereal matter. When our sun was born, the first part of the fireball to rise out of the black hole was a powerful cloud of gas, similar to the sack of water that is broken and released when a babe is born. In our analogy, instead of water, this was gas that extended off the sun. This gas was made up of subatomic particles and was an extension of the process being carried on in the core of the sun, the process of birth. To begin with, the energy was a cloud of whirling gases. The cloud of whirling gases broke into many different sized clouds of gas. The next stage was the phenomenon of like attracts like, which led to the grouping together of gases and bits of congealing nebulae into all those of like mind. The next stage was the attraction by properties of frequency. This was followed by a grouping together into bodies of half-formed stars. These half-formed stars grouped into constellations. The constellations then were the means of forming planets capable of life. Each constellation pooled its resources of thought forms and gave birth to a planet, or perhaps even twin or triplet planets. The first planet to be born was Orion, and its total atmosphere was comprised of what we call electricity. Picture, if you can, a bowl of clear crystal jello. Each of those tiny little squares of jello were comprised of what we call electricity on our planet. But this was a very strong electricity, more of a shimmering of electrical light. This first planet was light, made up of this strong electricity. This electricity is still available on this first planet. The atmosphere of the second planet emitted a cloud of electrified gas, an aura of powerful electricity. It was different than the form of gas that we think of. When this electrified gas became mixed with carbon or ash, it then formed a gas in the form that we know gas to be in. Helium was the form of atmosphere on the third planet. This helium was split by electrical charges as planet Earth was brought into being. This combination of helium being shattered with electricity of a voltage so high you could not begin to understand it, produced hydrogen. The hydrogen of our planet, the fourth, combined with the solidifying and evolvement of the mineral kingdom, produced neon gas. This combining took place in an orderly manner. The processes of evolution on each planet were incorporated into the atmosphere of the following planet and produced a different gas, which then in turn floated in the solar system and changed the original atmosphere of all the planets. These are what we call the active gases. 12 progressive planets make up our solar system. Our scientists have not considered the fact that planets move in and out of orbit around different suns. The planet Orion was, millions of years ago, in orbit around our sun. When the new eighth universe comes in, it is going to push Sirion into orbiting our sun when Placida moves out. There must be a pathway of 12 progressive planets in each solar system. Just as the Oversoul has 12 trips through 12 solar systems, all in the seventh universe of Orvonton, so will we have 12 levels in each of 12 planets to progress through, all in our own solar system. Our solar system cannot, will not, stay in the form or shape our astronomers are wanting to lock it into. Many of the moons around the other planets are in a state of suspended animation. They have been energetic, life-giving sources at some stage and in some gravity situation, not necessarily the one they are in at the present time. They have been attracted into the magnetic field of the ones they are around now, but weren't always necessarily there. Our moon merely reflects the sun's light. It has no inner light of its own. Therefore, the rhythms of the moon have a different effect on the human psyche. When we are turned away from the sun and do not receive its light being reflected from the moon, there is an entirely different vibratory pattern or energy frequency bearing on the receivers in humanity's brains, their energy receptors. The moon itself is serving as a movie screen, perhaps is the way to explain it. It's just serving to bounce that light off. So as the light hits the earth, it doesn't receive anything from that moon. It's just bounced back to earth and therefore does not have any vitality. The process of reincarnation of planets is over a much longer period of time than it is for suns. Planets are a long time being born, they are a long time achieving the height of their incarnation, and they are a long time on the downhill side. They linger in the ethers in the state of suspended animation for a long time before they return to the central core to their inner planes. When our sun first was born, coming up out of the black womb, the black hole of birth, its light was so brilliant, its energy so strong, that it destroyed all that came within a close distance by pulling them into its fireball. It took a certain amount of time for it to cool enough that those attracted to it fell into their gravity pattern and stayed in set revolution around the sun. That attraction period is still in effect, holding the planets in their orbits around this sun. The sun has many rings around it, many different vibratory rates in those rings, but those rings crisscross each other. They are not as the planet Saturn, where all the rings are in one layer, so to speak. The sun is completely encircled or girded by these rings, twining around it in all different directions, almost like a ball of string. Each of these rings is made up of a specific chemical element. Because of the intense heat from the body of the sun itself, these chemicals are blended into the gases that make up the rays which we receive from our sun. As the sun's journey ends, as it fades and loses heat, then the bands are no longer being activated. They are no longer going to be needed as this sun's incarnation will be finished. These bands will shrink back in and become part of the hard, barren core that is left, and it will be eons before it goes back into the central core.